This is the Cheat Codes Podcast with your host, Thomas Dockstader.
So today, really special episode. I have my mother, Deborah. Super excited to have you on because I think that you have an absolutely incredible story that I think needs to be shared. And so I know we could probably take 10 or 12 hours to tell it all in detail.
Yeah.
But I think that the more I've gone over your story in my head, the more I am absolutely amazed by all the things that you've gone through in your life. And what I wanted to do today was just kind of do an overall walkthrough of all the things that you've gone through and how you've had the unwavering capability to continue on with everything that you've been through. So let's kind of start with a little bit of the beginning, you know, where you grew up and kind of like the first part of your life, and we'll kind of progress through there as we go.
I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and my father was in the Air Force, and he died, got into a bad motorcycle accident, and was killed when I was 2.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild. So you really didn't ever know your dad?
No, there's things I remember and things people have told me. You know, I was pretty special to him. My biggest story was he bought me a rocking chair that cost him $50, which was a lot of money back in the 50s.
Yeah, heck yeah. Oh my God.
And he had a motorcycle, so he took me on his motorcycle, which I love motorcycles my whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's bits and parts that I remember, but
and then you had a younger sister as well, right?
Yes.
And she was
like just barely
couple months
born.
old. Yeah. Couple months old.
Yeah.
Wow.
So me and her. So as you can well imagine, it was pretty devastating for my mother, who was, you know, very young, and have the police come to your house and tell you that your husband had been killed.
She's in her early 20s, right? Or
yeah, she had to be. I didn't realize how young they were until I started doing research recently, you know, and they were pretty young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, again, this is in the 50s and really way different time than we live in now, right?
Yes.
Where a single mom with 2 kids, while that might be a little bit more common today, not super common back then, right? So your mom got into a relationship with someone else relatively early on, right?
Yes. I don't know a lot about it other than I know that she was pregnant and she had the baby adopted out to some relatives of mine that lived in California.
Okay.
And this was a short period of time because when I was 4, she married my stepfather.
Okay. So you grew up you had a stepdad growing up, and now he had a couple of, your mom and him had a couple of kids as well, right? Dave and Colette?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you had 3 siblings, and then, so you're growing up in Albuquerque, and, you know, through the 60s, right? And, I think, you know, I think a lot of people can relate to this, but, you know, relatively, challenging, just growing up with someone who's not your dad ultimately. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so just, you know, I see it with my son where, you know, I'm divorced from his mom, and, you know, he's a part of their family, and, you know, there's just a little bit of difference between their kids together versus, you know, him. And so you kind of dealt with that, you and your sister. And I think you told me, you know, that you and your sister kind of, you more or less stuck together as you guys were growing up because it was a little bit challenging not being his son, not being your stepdad's son, right? Or daughter.
Yeah.
Daughter, sorry.
You got me confused there.
Sorry. Daughter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I kind of took my sister under my wing just because Well, I did it with all of my siblings, actually. Wasn't just her, because he was a pretty abusive person. He could get real abusive. He had some alcohol problems. And so I kind of always felt like the little hen that had to gather up the little chicks and take care of them and protect them from him.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So he had some potentially some substance abuse issues, and which not uncommon in those times, right? And it wasn't really something that was outward and addressed in society in general. Like I think a lot of people were drinking heavily and smoking a lot back in those days. There's so much to go through in your childhood, but I think that with the breadth of your story, I want to get to like a little further along. When you kind of, once you turned 18, you were out of the house, right? You kind of were out of there.
Yeah, well, he kind of threw me out.
Okay. It was a mutual agreement that you both part ways.
Yes.
Okay. And then, so really, and this is kind of cool, but, you always cut my hair and did my hair, but like you went to beauty school, right?
Yes.
And so you were well known in the community, the religious community we were in, for cutting hair and doing things like that. So you kind of delved into that world, right? And really into the beauty world, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd done that for probably up until I met your father.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you met Dad Doyle around, how old were you? What, 25 or something like that?
Yeah, 24, 25.
24, 25.
I think more like 25 though.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is where the story gets interesting. Now my dad he was raised in the FLDS religious cult.
Correct.
When he grew up there when he was a child. But the reason that he was in Albuquerque was because of the state of Utah was prosecuting these polygamous men. And so my dad's dad was getting kind of split his family up. So the kids didn't get taken away and right. Like, so that was the whole reason he actually ended up in Albuquerque and how he met you, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So it was just kind of weird because he went to Highland High School and I went to Del Norte, which was just across the town from each other. Both our mothers lived on the street Valencia. They both loved the horse races. My mother worked at the horse races in Santa Fe. And
they were both named Gene too.
Yeah, and they were both named Gene. So it was like, and I met him when we were in the mountains. He was kind of helping me get down this mountain because I had just bought this brand new Camaro. And I was with my sister and it was her graduation. And so we that's where we met.
Just happened to run into each other.
And by the time I did all the math, I was like, oh, wow, this is meant to be. This was heaven sent, you know?
So talk to me a little bit of that, because I have my understanding of it. But I think the way that I interpreted it all, and I know from what I understand, he was a little bit of a party animal.
Yes.
Okay. But I also think that maybe something that really attracted you to him was it might have stemmed from where he was raised, just in the sense of being the way he treated women, or I don't know. You can tell me, like, what was the thing that kind of like anchored you into him versus some of the other men that you had experiences with?
Well, he was a partier. He just pot and alcohol. He had lots of friends, and he always wanted his friends to go everywhere with him, including our honeymoon. But anyway, I just told him I'm not going to have, and I was pregnant, so I told him I wasn't going to live a life like that. So you
guys dated, you ended up getting pregnant.
Yes.
Okay. And then, so it was kind of fun and games in the beginning, but then you got pregnant and you kind of gave him an ultimatum to, hey, look, if we're going to have a baby and do all these things, you got to kind of straighten up.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And he really did get into that part of it. And, you know, when he's talked to me about religion and how he believed and that he had this solid faith in God and stuff, that I was very impressed by that, because I'd pretty much grown up without religion. We went on Christmas or Easter to the Methodist church, but I grew up pretty much without religion in my life.
Okay. So your experience with religion was very limited. He had a solid religious upbringing, regardless of what the thoughts of it are. He believed in something, if that's correct.
Correct.
And big family, right? Big family that was in the religion, that was a part of the religion. He had a close ties to his mom and his grandpa and all those things, right? Yeah. So you guys end up getting married. You have 2 kids in Albuquerque. But then tell me what the conversation was like when he said, hey, we're going to go into this religion like full force. And by the way, the religion was the FLDS religious cult run by the Jeffs. Yeah.
Well, he kind of just asked me to start reading the Book of Mormon with him. And, you know, his mother used to tease me all the time, oh, you're going to have to marry your sister. And I'm going, there's no way I'm marrying my sister. So that was a big fear for me. And, but things just kind of progressed slowly. We started reading the Book of Mormon, and my sister and I were still very close. She helped me with Doyle a lot, and my grandma spent a lot of time taking care of Doyle.
Doyle, your firstborn.
My firstborn, yeah. And she was awesome with him. And then we started researching, you know, the Mormon religion. And I didn't really have a set, I believed in God.
Okay.
Because my mother had, I don't know, impressed me so much when I was young about believing in God. She didn't really show it to me. She just said to me this thing about God. And it stuck with me for the rest of my life.
Interesting. So it was really limited, and so then you have this guy that's kind of speaking about God and all these things. So in your mind, you're like, oh, this is interesting, I guess.
Well, the first man that had ever been in my life. Every man that I ever knew went out on their wives, had divorces, were, you know, just not great people. Massive functioning alcoholics.
Okay.
Is just how I should say it. I mean, and functioning in the fact that they got up and went to work every day.
But we're still heavily drinking.
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys make the decision that you're going to move from Albuquerque to Salt Lake City, where a large installation of the FLDS church was operating in the early 80s, right?
Well, it was kind of a command.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't just, oh, we're going to move to Salt Lake City.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes.
So Dad got told, hey, you got to move up here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So his mother and his brother's sister moved up here first. So then we moved up here right after that. And we became more and more entrenched in the religion. And to say it wasn't hard for me was just crazy, because I was a hairdresser. I was very worldly, as they would call me. Yeah. I was just, you know, I was just what they say, worldly. I was of the world. And so I don't think that his mother or any of them thought that I would last or that I would make it, because he had been married for a short period of time when he had Jody. And so
he had a previous marriage with a daughter.
That.
Yeah, okay.
She did not want to get into the religion.
So he tried to join the religion with another woman, didn't work out. So then you come along, you're willing to do it. You guys moved to Salt Lake City. And I think at this point you had you had 2, but then when you moved to Salt Lake, you had another daughter. Yep. And then I came But right around that time, let's talk about what happened with your sister.
So I guess my sister did come in right after I had Ellen. I can't remember exactly when, but.
So what was that? What was the story of what happened exactly?
Well, when we left Albuquerque, she became really sad, and she was having a really hard time because she just felt very lonely. She didn't feel like she had a purpose in life, and she just cried out to me all the time, "Oh, I want to come be in the religion with you." And I'm going, "Okay, well," and she just kept pursuing this with me and pursuing this with me. So, of course, I talked to Uncle Roy at the time.
Which was the prophet of the FLDS at that time.
Yes. And he said, well, we can bring her in. And I have found that most people who have sisters are going to love your kids more than anybody is going to love them. So if we brought her in, she would marry your husband.
Ugh. Your worst nightmare.
Yeah, my worst nightmare. Even though at the time I was pretty open to it in the fact that I believed what I was doing was right. I had found my path in life and that these were good people and that, you know, it was going to help her too. I mean,
So you bought in from a religious perspective.
Yeah.
And you thought, hey, this is going to be good.
Yeah.
For everyone.
Everybody. Yeah. Yeah. But, you know, her and I had always had a tumultuous relationship. Sometimes we got along, sometimes we didn't. But we lived together off and on most of our lives. And so I felt a big responsibility for her. And she was really, you know, in her heart, true felt of wanting to find something in her life too. And she felt like I had found that and she wanted to be part of it. So we all went into it, I think, with just open hearts and open minds about it, which I don't know how I'd gotten to that point because I was rebelling about it all the way up till then. But we did it.
Yeah.
And she actually just came to the house, and Uncle Rulon was in charge then, and he married us right there in our living room.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So then, so basically, in a couple of years, you met this guy. You had a couple kids. Now, all of a sudden, you're a part of this religion, and it's a plural polygamous religion. And your sister is now married to your husband along with you, and you guys are all living in the same house. Very
small house.
Holy smokes. So that in and of itself is just wild, right?
Well, I don't know if you can imagine being in love with someone. Like I was crazy in love with my husband and him the same with me because we had chosen each other.
Right.
And to have another woman come in the house and have to have him be in a marriage situation with her was hell on earth is all I can say.
Yeah.
For me, internally. Yeah. I didn't think I would experience it the way I did.
Yeah. And I mean, look, from my perspective, I also, you know, living in the house and experiencing it myself as I grew up, from my perspective, I felt like Dad was doing trying to make the most of it.
Right.
But I know, she struggled with weight. She, you know, I think she got around 400 or 500 pounds, something like that. She ended up only having one child with Dad. Right. I think that was the most they could do or whatever. But I think from my perspective, he was trying to do what this church was telling him to do. It wasn't some bonus for him. And maybe you can tell me something different, but I feel like he was just trying to make it work.
Yeah, I think at that point it was just his religious convictions.
So
he was trying to do what the prophets wanted him to do.
Right.
Because he had left once, and so he had come back. So I think he felt even more pressure to do what he was supposed to do.
Stick to it.
Yeah. So if the prophet said something to him, then he was all in on that.
Yeah. So now when we fast forward a little bit, if you say, all right, so now you're living in Utah and the thing is you weren't living in a compound, right? We grew up in just a normal standard neighborhood in Salt Lake City with the rest of the world, right?
Right.
However, you have a bunch of little kids. They're all running around in pilgrim clothes. You're in pilgrim clothes. And we're pretending to blend in the middle.
I was a little more fashionable, okay? I'm just going to say I tried to be as fashionable as I could in that situation.
But needless to say, we definitely stood out like a sore thumb out in the middle of there. Now, we were all going to the church-run school, Alta Academy, which was the principal of the school was Warren Jeffs.
Correct.
So you're kind of working this battle of like, you've got to send your kids to school, but then they're also in in a neighborhood, right? And so it's a very like tough contrast of trying to keep your kids. I mean, I know for me, I was like, well, why are we dressed this way?
Well, and it was always, I think the biggest thing was the fear of losing my children, because I'd always heard stories about them just coming in and taking your children.
Right.
So we tried to be secret about it, but it just, of course,
pretty obvious.
They ended up figuring it all out. But that was what drove it, was that fear that I would lose my kids.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I remember very clearly as a kid, kind of being told, hey, tell them that she's our aunt, that she's not our, she's not our mom, she's our aunt. And I remember clearly neighborhood kids asking us, what religion are you? And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea what we are. I don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, like, hey, look, I've had my oldest brother, your oldest son on here. We've talked in depth about his thing. So he went and had challenges with prison and things like that. So you're kind of like playing this balance of like trying to help your kids, trying to deal with your sister as a sister wife, trying to deal with your husband. And then also something that I didn't know as a child, but Dad was a really bad alcoholic during all of this and struggling. And you saw it, you experienced it, you knew it. Me as a kid, I didn't know it, but you were dealing with this. You're dealing with your husband who's, again, if you relate it to my book, it's unaddressed traumas that he had as a child that he wasn't dealing with. Then it's coming out in this coping mechanism of alcoholism, but he's also added an extra wife that is your sister. Plus he now at this point has 5 kids, which again, you went on to have a total of 9. And then he had one with...
We didn't use birth control, okay? So that
obviously.
That is one reason why it ended up being that many children.
Yeah, and so I think that's incredible.
There was great pressure from my sister. I mean, we couldn't talk about it for at least the first 4 or 5 months. I couldn't talk about it.
Because of the jealousy from her?
Yeah.
Okay. So you had to like keep it hidden.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are dynamics I was totally oblivious to, obviously, as a child.
I couldn't. And it was interesting because my daughter, Ellen, she always knew. She'd come up in the bathroom and say to me, Mom, you're pregnant. I'd go, shut up. Can't tell anybody. So I'm sure that was confusing for her, too.
Yeah.
But, it was just kind of this big secretive thing we were trying to do.
Yeah, and I think the crazy thing too is like all the while, we're going to church and they're telling us the world is going to end at the year 2000. Get ready for the destructions. The destructions are coming. The apocalypse is coming. It's going to destroy everyone. Be good. You must be good. And I remember really clearly for myself when I was like, I don't know, 12 or something like that. Here I'm going to school every day. Warren's sitting there preaching all this stuff. And then I look and see like, well, we have TV. And I'm like, I go and talk to Dad. Dad, why do we have TV? And, there's just like so many dynamics of the like whole church and trying to keep everything together. At one point, I think it was in the early 90s, early 90s, 93, 94, I think just between you and Donna, it was just too much.
Yeah.
And so Dad ended up moving her down to Colorado City. So he more or less had a 2-home household where she lived down in Colorado City with her daughter and you lived in Salt Lake City with your kids. And that was kind of how he would go kind of down there a couple times a month and see her. But ultimately he lived in Salt Lake City, and that kind of like calmed everything down quite a bit. But where it gets wild is when the year 2000 approaches and the church comes and says, everyone has to move to Colorado City. Everyone that lives in Salt Lake City has to move down to Colorado City. And that's that famous compound where the FLDS is. So talk to me a little bit about that time in your life when you got told that.
I had this really fabulous job. I was a barber down in downtown Salt Lake City in one of the oldest barber shops that had been around forever.
The Alta Club.
Yeah, the Alta Club. And we were getting ready for the Olympians to come in, and I would be cutting their hair too. And actually cut some of the Jazz's hair too. But yeah, we get this call, and it was like, okay, I mean, I'm working. So they send a semi truck, put it in my driveway, and I think it was on Priscilla mostly, probably some others of you, but to load up that truck with all of our stuff. And I didn't want to go. I was not going. I was putting my heels in. I'm not going. And you and Rulin and a couple, but mostly I think it was you and Rulin.
Well, I had left the church at that point.
Oh, maybe it was just Rulin then. But the two of you were talking to me, please, Mom, just go down for a year or two. If you
I think I did tell you that.
Yeah, if you don't like it, then you can leave. But please, we don't want to lose you, and I didn't want to lose you, of course.
Right.
So I just was in a catch-22.
Yep.
I just really, it didn't feel like I had a choice to make other than to just go with you guys.
So you had to leave your home of 25 years, 30 years, something like that, and you had to go and move into a trailer.
Well, they took all my stuff and put it in this a shed with a dirt floor and just threw my stuff in there, pretty much. I mean, I didn't know where anything was for at least a year, you know, because it was the most... miscombobulated,
so you basically got
time.
Ripped out of the roots. It was really quick. I remember everybody was just like, you have to move really quick. So everybody moves down there. And so now you're living in a trailer with your sister again. And I think you had 5 kids still at home at that point. And she had her one. So you had 6 kids, 3 adults in this small, tiny 3-bedroom trailer, literal mobile home. And at the same time, all this rhetoric is being spewed onto you guys about the end of the world. The world's going to end when the Olympics come. You know, all this stuff's going to happen. Warren's father was really on his last leg, and Warren was really running the church at that point. And he was implementing all these crazy things, right? This is when the world started to kind of become aware of Warren and like all the wild stuff that he was doing. Now, you were there for about a year. And you had established your own little barbershop down there and everything, right?
Well, Dad was trying to keep me there.
Right.
Because I was sticking in my heels bad. I did not want to stay there. I didn't like anything about it. It was like being in a prison camp. I'm not even kidding. They were watching what we were wearing. They were telling on each other if they could see your garments underneath if you were wearing your garments or not, if they were going around. I mean, I'm sure they had cameras everywhere. You felt like you were in a concentration camp. And it was just, so he found this little barber shop and he fixed it up for me. And I ended cutting I had cut a lot of people's hair in Salt Lake, but when I got down there, I ended up cutting a lot of people's hair. And the people that came to me that said, I can't do this. I'm trying so hard to do what Warren wants me to do, but I can't do it. I had women. I mean, I've never seen such poverty in the United States in my whole life, where these women were in one bedroom with 10 kids, all living together. And the poverty down there was just, I was sickened by it. I just couldn't even believe what situations these people were living in. And I had lots of people talking to me, like Jody and Doyle, and just hitting me hard.
Get out of there.
You got to get the heck out of there, Mom. You got to get out of there.
Even your son, who was in prison at the time, was telling you to get out of there, right? Just wild. Absolutely crazy. And it was just, the rhetoric was ramping up with the church. Now, you got to a breaking point, right? And you said to Dad, you're like, I'm not doing this anymore, right? Yep. I'm leaving. No matter what, I'm leaving. Yeah. So you packed up your young kids, and you moved down to St. George. So for those of you listening, you know, Colorado City, Hilldale, Utah, they're down near Zion National Park in Utah. St. George is a local, the closest big city. And so you basically packed all your stuff up and moved down to St. George.
Yeah. And, you know, they had threatened me and warned me that if I left there, that all wrath was going to come down upon me. People were going to treat me horrible. And that I would lose all my kids anyway. And I did end up going through a lot of struggles with my kids. Yeah. You know, they had lived such a sheltered life, and then I go and throw them in public school. Those who would go, not all of my kids would even go, but those who went, it was just like such cultural shock to them. And you can imagine. They couldn't even, they had lived, the difference between my kids and me was they had lived that lifestyle their whole life. Right. And I had lived my whole life before I had gotten there. Yeah. So I had a different perspective of things. Right. And so it was pretty devastating. Well, it was shocking for them. Yeah, it was hard. And I remember that time. And, you know, the one story that sticks with me is like my youngest brother, Richard, you guys had left, and I think he was, you know, 12 or 13 or something like that. And he got put into public school. And little did you know that he got introduced to heroin at a very young age. And started doing it, having no idea what it was or what the repercussions of it were. The place that they sent us, it was a crazy story about me driving out of town and not knowing what I was going to do. I stayed with Benjamin and you for a while in Hurricane. I lived there for a while. I cried every single day. But I got the phone book. I looked up these names. My name went right to Sue Kimball, who actually helped me get into Fountain Heights, which was a low-income apartment. And I was working at the Bloomington Country Club, which I had done while I was still in Colorado City. So I was making $8 an hour. With 5 kids at home. Yeah. And bringing my kids without their father down to this low-income place where I'm thinking, oh my gosh. But it was a heck of a lot better than where you left, right? It was. It really was. So, but you guys met, and Richard, you know, they made friends with kids that were doing drugs. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so, I mean, look, that introduced him and others to just the world that we're so naive to. Now, in the interest of time, we're going to skip ahead a little bit, but as you got established in St. George, something major happened, right, with Dad. So so talk to me a little bit about that. Well, then he was staying in the trailer down south, and he ends up getting cancer. And so I went to this Sue Kimball, who had never let a man come into her program because she was helping polygamous women get out of that situation. And she allowed me to have Dad come with me. And so I started taking care of him when I found out he had cancer. So now here's the thing. This is big. When Dad had
found out he had stayed in Colorado. So you had left, he had stayed with your sister. And
he wasn't even with my sister anymore, really.
Okay.
That was
kind of breaking apart as well. Okay.
Yes.
But then he got cancer. Now talk to me about the conversation that was, because basically at that point he's like, I'm sick and I want you even more than the religion. Is that fair to say? Or what? I don't know what happened there.
I don't think those words were ever said to us.
Well, they were implied, don't you think?
I just said, I will take care of you.
And he was like, okay.
Nobody's taking care of you.
Because he had to make the choice that he left the church, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
He left the church.
But he wasn't going to really talk about that.
So
he wasn't a big talker. Okay. He probably said more to my son Rulon than he did to me.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, my interpretation of it is, Mom, he didn't want to be without you. That was my interpretation. At the end of the day, he'd rather leave the church and be with you. And especially in a situation where he was really sick, I think he preferred to be with you than anyone else. I kind of, to some degree, believe he would have left even if he didn't get sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
because he wanted to start dating me, because after I'd left, he said, I want to start dating you.
He didn't want to lose you.
Yeah.
I mean, look, that's the honest truth.
He came to the door one night in a bolo tie, and, he was all prepped because he was going to
win you back.
Win me back, yeah.
So from the time that, and his cancer was rough. Mm-hmm. I mean, so basically he was diagnosed with some type of throat cancer. Mm-hmm. And originally the doctor said, hey, we're going to operate and we're going to take it out. And he never returned from that. Like, he never bounced back from that operation.
Worst day of my life.
So they cut into his neck, and it was a long 13 or 14.
12-hour surgery. Super
long surgery. They went in and said they removed it. They put a bone graft in his jaw because they said the cancer was in there. And by the way, my dad was about 6 feet tall and about 250, 260 pounds. When he died, 18 months after diagnosis, he was about 120 pounds.
Yeah. And
there was a hole in his jaw.
Because they were feeding him. He had a tracheotomy.
Feed
him because he couldn't eat.
Yep. He got a tracheotomy.
He had like 3 or 4 different holes all over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feeding tube. So he declined really quick. Mm. I mean, he got cancer, and in 18 months.
It was 2 years.
Okay. Yeah. So he got cancer, but he never had a bounce back. It just went downhill.
Yes.
Now, when he died, I feel like that was a massive blow to the family, because we had been a part of this religion our whole lives. Right? For most of your life, you had too. And he was really the linchpin of the family. And then, as you said, you bring your younger kids down, introduce them into school. They're leaving that religion, which is a psychological nightmare. And then their father dies. Your husband dies. Mm-hmm. I remember that our family went into chaos mode after he died. All of us, the majority, I won't say all of us, but the majority of us went deep into substance abuse, alcohol, drugs, many of us getting in trouble with the law. And all the while you're sitting here trying to keep what's left of your family together. Mm-hmm. And there's just tragedy after tragedy, so many things happening, your children getting arrested, drunk driving. I mean, just talk to me a little bit about your time in St. George's. Like, all this stuff is just exploding. Marriage is ending. Divorces from your kids are going through divorces. Your kids are getting pregnant and having divorces, right? Like, all this stuff.
It was just like a bomb went off, and trying to hold in everybody's emotions and get everybody through their emotional turmoil. A lot of my kids got mad at me, and angry with me. Most of them were angry with me for a while, just because of everything we'd been through. And I was just trying to put out fires. I literally, that's what my life was putting out fires.
Yeah.
I really wasn't living per se. I was just putting out fires all the time until probably just still now. I'm still putting out fires.
I think you're putting out fires, but also I think one thing that's important to understand is like you were in an altered state of being in that religion, and then you were also injected back into the world, right?
Yeah.
So, and then your husband dies, and you weren't like, Dad was the leader of the family. Let's not get that wrong. Like he was very much the one like, hey, we're going to pay the bills this way. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. So he was gone. You didn't have that. You didn't have help from, you didn't have really a great network because your network of people you knew was kind of gone. Yeah. And even when Dad died, his family didn't come to the funeral because he had left the church.
Right.
So we were ostracized, right, from any connection to any of those people we had grown up with. So then you're dealing with your children all suffering badly for many different reasons, growing up in the religion, right? Like all these things. And you're also trying to keep it together for yourself, and you're trying to get your kids through school. I mean, gosh, like how much more can a person take, right? Just a huge challenge, one after the other. Now, when we fast forward a few years, lots of challenges, right? Like, I think in those times I went through 3 divorces myself. Yeah. I was struggling with substance abuse. I was suicidal. I can't speak for the rest of the family, right?
Most of my kids have gone through periods of being suicidal, and
for fair reason, right? Yeah. Because look at everything that all the emotional trauma and just no capability to, or no groundwork for any type of healthy coping mechanism whatsoever.
And I mean, I was in the middle of it myself.
Exactly.
My husband died, and I had to get up the next day and make oatmeal for everybody. It's not like I got to stop my life and grieve. I had to figure it out.
Right.
So I figured it out.
Yeah.
I mean, I got you guys going as much as I could. Me and Mary stayed here the longest of anybody, and she got kicked out of school. She had some issues and problems that she had to deal with, even though she wasn't one to get into drugs or anything like that. She was probably, she was always there for me.
Yeah. So
she was my little buddy, and we were, she was always there for me. She went through most of the stuff with Dad and I, and, his death and knowing that he was going to die and everything.
Well, she was young when he died, about 12, I think.
Yeah.
Or about 12 years old. So,
yeah.
Hey, look, losing your father or losing a parent when you're that young is devastating, even for someone who didn't grow up in a cult or, something like that, right?
Exactly. She's trying to fit into school, which she was the best one in school. She did great in school. She really struggled with school, but she did really the best of anybody with school.
Well, and I think that I think everyone in our family has shown a lot of perseverance in, like, again, just what I explained, all those things that were happening, coexisting with each other, losing your parents, leaving a religion, like all these things it's just like this perfect storm of trauma. And so as we kind of work through that and we work through up, you got to a point where maybe some of your children started to heal. Mm-hmm. I got sober about 7 years ago. And other people in the family have been able to rid themselves of some of the addictions and challenges and are starting to go through a process of healing themselves. But even with that being said, now you're faced with this new challenge that came up a couple of years ago. You are currently in liver failure. Mm-hmm. So
yeah. And I've been studying nutrition my whole life, just because I didn't like my kids being on Ritalin or any drugs or anything. I had this aversion towards drugs with good reason. And so I've had to fight a system who, said, you've got to do this. You have to have a liver transplant. And I'm like, no.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I was actually about a year ago roughly, a little over a year ago.
Well, and it's been 4 years since I've been dealing with it.
Yeah, you've been dealing with the liver problems for 4 years, but about a year ago, it was bad. You were really weak. You were yellow. I was not looking good. I accompanied you on an appointment to your doctor, and I was in the room when he said, if you don't get a liver transplant, you're going to die. And it's probably about 6 months. They told us you would die in about 6 months if you didn't get a liver transplant. They also had you on a bunch of medications that were not making you feel super great. We left that appointment, and you were, here's the thing. I cannot imagine, and most of us can't imagine, being at a point that you're at where you are faced with the end of your life. It is a whole new set of like challenges that you have to deal with of being at the end of your life. And you were really caught between a rock and a hard place of saying, should I do the liver transplant? But I think what you said to me was, you said that Dad, he lived in a hospital for the almost the remainder of his life, and you didn't want to do that, right? And we had a conversation, and I told you, I said, Mom, I believe you'll live as long as you want to. And you decided to get off of the majority of your medications,
all
right?
My medications.
You got off all your medications.
Which they told me I would die that week.
And you decided not to get the transplant, right?
Correct.
Now we're a year and change since that time.
Well, I told the doctor he didn't know everything, which is very brave of me. And I tend to be that kind of a person. And I said, you don't know what God has in store for me.
That's true.
And you can say that this is going to happen to me and this is going to happen to me, but I believe something different.
Yeah.
I believe I can heal my body through my belief. And I did a lot of praying. I did a lot of castor oil packs. I changed my complete diet. I don't take anything anymore.
Yeah.
And this is, here I am.
Here you are.
Here I am.
And what's wild is you're 72 years old, which first of all, a lot of people that I see that are 72, they don't look like you. They look a lot older than you look. You look absolutely phenomenal.
Oh, so sweet.
You really do. And you have, Mom, you have such a great outlook. Everything I just listed that you've gone through, there's so many people that could have given up, that could have gone into addiction, that could have said, my life's too hard and I've been through too much. You never, ever have done that. You don't struggle with addiction. You never have, even though you've been surrounded by it your entire life. One, a lot of your kids struggle with it. Your husband struggled with it. Your stepfather struggled with it. It seems like it's just this thing that's been around you your whole life. You yourself have had the excuse to go into it, and you haven't. And even with all the challenges of your children and your family, you've stayed resilient. And even this last year where you were faced literally with... Well,
I was on hospice, so... Yeah,
hospice exactly. They had written you off.
I remember us coming back from that Mexican restaurant, and I said to you, I mean, I was just devastated. I was like, I'm not ready. I mean, I've been tired, real darn tired beyond belief. But I just said, I'm not ready to not be with my kids. I've got to still be with my kids. And I don't know if that was a turning point. It obviously was. But I've just been following my heart and praying and believing that I'm healing my body. And that when it's my time to go, I'm going to go. And I don't want to be going to the hospitals every 5 seconds, taking their pills, taking their anti-rejection medications, have my whole body, you know, violated by their big old scars and all the stuff they want to do to you. Because once they get you in that system, then you're going to be there the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And I had an IHC person come and talk to me, and she said she couldn't believe that I wasn't on drugs, that most people that are my age are on at least 13 different medications.
Yeah.
And so I'm a big advocate of fighting that system.
Yeah. And and you are an example of, I do believe this more than anything, that we, our energy can heal our bodies, and our energy can keep us, can put us in a place. But the thing is, I also noticed when you were in that dire place, your energy was low, and you were really looking at yourself and being like, oh man, this is it. I remember last year you were really, really down, and the only thing that I've seen change is that you've shifted your energy and your belief system into something that is absolutely incredible. And what I think is even more cool is that over this last year, we have seen a massive shift in our family's healing. So many of my brothers and sisters have stopped using alcohol, stopped using drugs, have started healing, have started exercising, and just doing all these things, and really like immaculate transformations that everyone is going through. And you've been able to witness it, which I think is just absolutely incredible. And I think that lends to like your faith in yourself and your family, to, while we've all been through so many hard things, there's this, you have this bright side view of saying, you know your kids are going to be okay, and they're going to make it once you're not here.
Yeah. And I mean, I attribute my boys Mary has always been my big support system. And then she had to back off a little bit because, it was just consuming her too much, and it wasn't mentally healthy for her. And my boys have stepped up and become my biggest cheerleaders in the fact of just saying, Mom, you can do it. I mean, Doyle just kicks my rear end. He doesn't mince words. And it's like, no, I'm not accepting that you're dying. You're not dying.
Yeah.
You're going to keep going.
Well, and I think to your point, it's like, I can't help you if I don't help myself.
Correct.
And so when I'm sitting there struggling in addiction, of course, Mary's going to step in and be a support to you, because I wasn't able to be. Right. Right. And I think what's cool now is, like, as we're coming around the corner here of this last year, a lot more people have gotten into a place where they are able to help. Exactly. And that's helped, take a little load off of Mary, right? 'Cause she's been there for you for a lot of it. And I know you guys had a super close relationship. And I think the other beauty part of this is that you've been able to stick around and see your grandkids. You have a bunch of grandkids, and you're able to experience them. And I think they're such a blessing to you. I think you live for your grandkids. Well,
I've had two different sets of grandkids. I've got grandkids that are married, and then I've got grandkids that are just being born, and great grandkids that are being born. And it's just, it blows my mind. Yeah. The posterity that I've built.
You and Dad have created all these.
And he would be blown away. Yeah. He would literally be blown away. Yeah. Because most of his family didn't believe that I was good enough, or that I was going to make it, and I outstood them all.
Well, guess what?
Yeah.
You are. Yeah. You're good enough. Yeah. You're absolutely good enough. Yeah. I mean, I can say this. I think that when you were planning to come to this world, you took on an extra load, and you said, I'm going to take on so many challenges, and because I can do it. And you've absolutely shown that. It just, when I think about your story from start to finish, which we've covered here today, obviously there's so much more, but just the details of that alone, you are absolutely incredible that you've had the capability to stay positive and to not give up, because so many people would. And that's the reason I wanted to have you on, because your story is really inspiring. It's absolutely inspiring that you've had the capability to get through all of these challenges and stay positive, and even to the point of really literally healing yourself with your positivity, I believe. Yeah. Even with everything you've been through, it's amazing, and it's incredible. As we wind down here, what would you tell the folks that are listening to this, that are struggling? What's your advice to the people out there that are really struggling?
Well, I think the key to it is that you keep on going, that no matter what hits you in life, which life is going to hit you. You know, you keep thinking, well, oh, someday there's not going to be any challenges. No, there's always challenges, constant challenges. But it's how you deal with them, and it's how you work with it, and it's that you keep going. You know, you can't give up. And believe me, there's been so many times I just want to give up. I'm so tired. And the liver thing, I was just extremely tired to where I just want to go to sleep. I don't want to wake up, you know. Yeah. And it just something inside of me is that same relentless thing of just keep going.
Well, one thing I think you've done, and you've shown me this, and I've inherited this from you as well, is it seems to me that when a problem approaches you, you read tons of books, you dig in and you try to understand, and you want to learn and you want to grow. So you're using these challenges as the ability to find a growth opportunity. And it really has built up a really thick skin for you to just be able to handle these things that continue to come at you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm so proud of my children. They're amazing, just amazing children for what they've been through and the growth that they've had. And like you said, in particular this year, seems like people have done a lot of growing. And to the fact that because addiction is a very selfish act, in that it doesn't allow you to experience other things in life. You are just an addict. That's all you're thinking about. Yep. So now that you guys aren't thinking about that anymore, you can put more into who you are.
Yeah.
And you can have a relationship with me and other people that you were never able to have before.
Yeah, it was just a lot of numbing and like trying to escape. And look, I think that it goes the full opposite direction. I think once you can rid yourself of that terrible coping mechanism and you can start to go inside yourself and understand who you are, when you find that value in yourself, I think that it then starts to reflect out. And for me, it's been like, okay, how do I help other people? Whole purpose of this podcast is to get a message out of like, hey, there is a way, you know, it's not lost. There's a way that you can find some power to carry on and find value in your story, and create ultimately the life that you want to have. And I think that's a great point, that if we're sitting there numbing ourselves, we don't have the capability. It's a very selfish thing to do.
Well, you're subtracting from all of your relationships. And so there's just been periods of time where I couldn't really have a relationship with some of you because of your addiction and what you were going through, because that was your main focus. And you can't deal with that with another person. That person has to come to that realization on their own, which is extremely difficult for a mother.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, look, I have a 12-year-old, and so I'm just starting to understand what it is that you've gone through, because I can't imagine watching him go through addiction. I can't imagine it, and I don't want to imagine it. And the fact that you've had to do that with so many of your children is just heartbreaking. Yeah. And I sympathize with you so much because it's so challenging. And I sympathize for, like, I apologize for all the pain I put you through in watching me go through that addiction, right? Because I'm just sitting there hurting myself. You're watching your child hurt themselves. Yeah. And so, I mean, the fact that you've always been there for me and picked up my phone call, and it's been incredible. And I couldn't want for a better mother, because you've always been there. You've always, even though you've been going through a hard time, you've had the capability and capacity to be there for me.
Well, I made an agreement with myself that once your father died, that no matter when you guys called me, no matter what time of the day it was, even though I put it in the bathroom now, that I take your calls and I just at least be there for you and listen, which that's been my goal, and I have stuck to it. And you all know I mean, if I don't answer my phone, the troops are going out. What's going on with Mom?
Well, I don't hope for that day anytime soon. I hope you're with us for a lot longer. But I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. I think it's going to help a lot of people.
Thank you.
And
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, son.
All right.
Thank you for being a great son.
You're welcome.